Yes, really appreciate your time. It's really cool to have you here today. I know you're very busy, I'm sure, with going through queries and working through things like that and supporting your clients. So
Mhm.
it's really cool to speak to an actual literary agent on the podcast today for the first time, which is really cool.
Mhm.
So Kate, just for anyone who doesn't really know who you are, they probably do, but in case they don't, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background and what you're doing right now and how you kind of got to be at that point?
Sure. So I'm vice president and literary agent at the Howard Morheim Literary Agency in Brooklyn, New York. I've been there for 20 years, which is kind of bonkers to think about. And I started my publishing career at the University Press of Florida, a small university press, because I had gotten an internship there when I was an undergraduate, and my sister, who's very smart, was like, "You should go do that," and I did, and it started me on this path. I learned pretty quickly as I learned about the different roles in publishing that I wanted to be a literary agent because I knew I would have a lot of control over my schedule and what projects I could do eventually after the kind of journeyman apprenticeship period.
Mm.
Um, and that I might not have to live in New York forever because at the time I didn't want to live in New York. I grew up in the American South and I didn't want to live in New York. And well, it's now more than 20 years later, and I still live in New York and I love it now. But I knew there would be a lot of flexibility in this part of the job. How I knew that when I was 19 years old, I do not know, but I was right about one
Mm.
thing at least. Um, and I went to graduate school in between working at a university press and becoming an agent. And I was there for 3 semesters until I realized I wanted to be a grown-up and not a student, which no shade to my program. I went to the University of Southern Mississippi and it was wonderful. And I got to write for a long time and it was great. But I was like, I want a career on top of being a writer because I didn't think I had the mettle to like be a starving artist. Like I'm too practical. So I was like, okay, I'll go find a career that's close to what I want to do. And that also interests me. And so then I did. I graduated early. I sold all my stuff and I drove to New York City.
Mm.
Um, and I got a job as the assistant to 7 agents. That was my first New York City publishing job, which was a lot, and they
Mm.
were all wonderful people. And eventually I moved to the Morheim agency as a full agent. And I represent all kinds of clients. Luckily, I can do whatever I want, which again, I was right about that. And I do a lot of science fiction and fantasy for adults and kids. I do literary and commercial fiction for adults and kids. I have done a lot of illustrated books in my career, both from like, pictures of funny cats from the internet to knitting and sewing craft books. And
Mm.
I often get weird stuff. I gravitate towards it. And so I think editors in the business, like when they see my name come up in their inbox, they're like, what does she have now? I think, or I hope that's what they say. And so if it's kind of hard to describe, sometimes I get that, but I have my job and my skill is to try to describe it in a way that the reader will understand.
Mm. Yeah. What is that like when you are going to an editor or a publishing house and you're kind of pitching one of your clients' books? How does that what does that process look like for an agent?
Well, it primarily happens over email,
Mm.
especially post. Well, we're not totally post, but after 2020, um, when nobody was in an office, I couldn't just call people on the phone because I used to call people on the phone, and I know that might shock some people or terrify them. But I'd call and be like, "Hi, how are you? What's going on? How was your summer vacation? Okay, I've got this great book for you, and it's about this." And sometimes I would have 30 seconds, and sometimes we'd talk for 10 minutes.
Mm.
And it would just depend on the editor and their time and the book and all these things. But now it's an email. And it's my job to get their attention as fast as possible because they have 75 other queries that or submissions that day, maybe. Maybe not that much, but maybe that month. And then I consider it my job to help, like, give the editor the tools they need to sell it down the line because the
Mm.
editor is going to read it and say, "Oh, hopefully I like this." I have to go to the marketing department, the sales team, and my boss, and all convince them that this is a book we can sell. And
Mm.
so, how do I give them the tools, both in a ways of like how to talk about the book and like other books that sold well that are like it, like comp titles, as we call them.
Mm,
How do I give them those tools so that when the editor goes to sales and marketing, it's this book and it's like this meets that.
mm,
Sometimes it's like that, sometimes it's not that schema, but
mm,
I just want to make it easy because if it's easy for the editor to tell the marketing department, and the sales team, then it's easy for the sales team to tell the retailers. And
mm.
then if it's easy for the retailers, then they can tell the customers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be dumbed down. It just has to be fluid.
Mm. Yeah, I love that explanation. I think some people kind of forget that there's this whole process. It isn't just a matter of I get an agent and then the agent just automatically gets me a book published and as straightforward as that. There's this whole process of convincing different people on different levels until everyone agrees and meets in the middle and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, like, 'cause I've been on the other side of things where I've been an author trying to get an agent and going through the querying process and stuff like that. And it is a frustrating kind of thing. But I think whenever we don't have that understanding of what agents are actually going through, it makes it more difficult. I think if we understand that and what that process looks like, then it makes it more reasonable for us as writers. And for you, Kate, whenever you get a submission and you think this writer has it, this is it, this is a book I want to represent, what is that point? What do you hit in that process when you're reading the query and you think this is one I want to take on?
It could happen at any time. The first sentence, the 57th sentence, the 160 millionth sentence, whatever it is. But I that point, there are 2 points that kind of clue me in. One is I forget I'm reading a query
Mm,
and I'm just reading something that I am enjoying reading, or that is holding my attention because I don't have to personally like every single book. Like I'm not selling books just for me as a reader, but as a reader, I need to be interested. It has to keep my attention, and
mm,
lots of different books can keep my attention. Um, and then when I start thinking, oh, this will be perfect for so and so, like an
mm,
editor's name pops into my head, and I think, yeah, or like, oh, this feels like a tour book, or like when I start to do my job before I'm even like finished
mm,
reading the sample, that's a clue to me that this is something to pay attention to, at the above all the other ones, because I have to pay attention to all of them, but like some, like, that
mm.
there's only so many hours of the day.
Yeah, yeah. Um, how do you reconcile, Kate, the whole creative side of writing with the sort of business marketing agent kind of side of things? Because you obviously are a writer as well. So how do you kind of balance those things up for yourself in terms of just your day to day and your week to week?
Uh, I, I now that I've published a book, this Right Through It is my first published book. I have tried to, with my agent, sell many other books that didn't sell.
Mm,
So I talk about this a lot in the book. But like I'm not like there's nothing magical about me as a person or an agent that like gets me a book deal personally.
mm,
Like I can't call up my buddy and be like, "Hey, give me $1 billion. I got a cool book. You don't even have to read it. Bye." Like that's not a thing that happens. And it's not even a thing that happens for me as for my clients.
mm,
So there has to be a book there. And I tried to sell several picture books, a middle grade novel and an adult novel that didn't work before this nonfiction book worked. And I even just after publishing this one book, I get it. Like I get some of the mistakes I made. Mistakes are just things, some of the reasons why things before didn't work.
mm,
And I can't believe that I didn't see it sooner. And I'm a person with 20 years worth of experience in publishing. So the
mm,
message under there is that like there isn't a magic potion that will get you a book deal, and that it is a learning curve for literally everyone. And as I and doing it is what you learn from.
mm,
So most people don't sell their first book that they tried to write or even pitch.
mm,
And that is normal. Another thing that I don't think people realize. Um, and I certainly didn't sell the first book I wrote. Um, and that's okay. But now, as I am thinking about writing my next book, which I'm trying to write a novel and trying to find the time, just like everybody else with a day job, um, I'm thinking more about that pitch. And I don't think it's going to commercialize my book or like make it like dumb it down. But I'm I'm really trying to clarify what I want to do in this book as a writer and then what and how the reader's going to want that.
Mm. Yeah. Is that a fiction book or nonfiction, did you say? Sorry.
Fiction, yeah, I'm trying to
Fiction.
write a historical novel.
Okay.
And all the chatter on the internet and in publishing is that historical novels don't sell right now. And I think that is kind of true, and there's some reasons, but I kind of don't care
Mm.
because it's what I want to write, and I'm not trying to sell it today. I won't be trying to sell it for a couple of years, probably. So
Mm.
maybe the market will change. I don't know, but that's what I want to do, so I'm gonna do it.
Mm. That's interesting, actually. You're talking about how you're writing it now and it's for a couple of years down the line. It's not going to be maybe the moment right now to do it, but that moment will come in future. Do you kind of see like trends kind of coming and going in publishing where there's a genre that's really, really popular at one time, and then maybe that's going to cycle back around and become popular again in a few years' time? Is that the way it works? Is it kind of like in waves in publishing?
I think so. And I don't
Mm.
know that somebody somewhere has probably studied it and can tell you that it's a 7.5 year cycle or whatever it is. Like, I don't know. And I don't think that you can set your watch by it. But things do come back around. Everything we're calling romantasy now was paranormal romance 15 years ago, and like Twilight and, vampires and yay, great. Like that. Yes, fantastic. Awesome. And there was a good long time there where if you're writing a vampire novel, and I'm making air quotes, you probably couldn't sell it because we were
Saturated.
technically doing other things, or the
Mm.
readers were interested in other things.
Mm.
But now it's not as hard as it was before, except for the fact that the market is now pretty full.
Mm.
So, as publishing people, I know I've talked to agents and colleagues who are like, what do we think is going to be next? And none of us know,
Mm.
but we're going to give it a shot.
Yeah. What's it like, Kate, and this is again, I haven't actually mentioned this before in a previous conversation, but um, whenever you ring up one of your clients and tell them that their book has been picked up by a publishing house, what does that conversation go like, and how does it feel for you as an agent?
It's really, really great. It's really super fun.
Mm.
And I often, when we get in, like I got an offer for a client's manuscript yesterday. And the first thing I do is send the offer to the author. And the fastest way to do that is on email. And this author doesn't live in the US, so there was weird timeness. So timelines. So I was like, I wasn't going to pick up the phone necessarily. So I forward the email and I'm like, many exclamation marks, a few short, like, hey, this is what I think, broad strokes. Um, and then telling them what I'm going to do next, which is call everybody else still reading the book and say, hey, I have an offer on the table. Where are you? Do you want
Mm.
to play? Um, and so when the offer comes in, I have a bunch of stuff to do.
Mm.
And so sometimes I have to stop and remember that, like, we should enjoy this moment, but I also just need to get to work. It's like I'm going to do a whole bunch of other things for the author and for this offer.
Mm.
So, I probably should sit back and enjoy it a little more. Especially if it's an author's, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever deal where it's becomes maybe a little blasé or we're a blasé about it. And, I forget to be like, no, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Let's dance around and get on Zoom or whatever. But I have a bunch of stuff to do as an agent when an offer comes in. So my first thought is get to work.
Mm. What are those things you have to do? Just broad strokes. What's the next steps after that point?
If other people are still reading the book, as I said, check in with them, see if anybody else wants to offer. If there is somebody else who wants to offer, then we set up an auction, where it isn't exactly what it sounds like. There's not like me yelling at people and talking very quickly and being like 50, 100, whatever. But I will then need to codify some rules and decide how we're going to run it and decide when it's going to happen, and then organize all that. And then, of course, answer all the questions my client might have. Be like, is this normal? What about this number? And should we go ask for this? And, and depending on where the author is in their career, they'll have different sets of, um, questions.
Mm,
And then, especially with a newer client, or a client who's hasn't sold a book yet, will go through every little bit of the offer, be like, okay, this is the royalty rate for the paperback, and this is what happens if it sells overseas, and this is what the rights say, and blah, blah, blah. And so we'll go through those little things
mm,
as much as the client needs, because it's my job to explain those things.
mm,
And I want to. And then we it can take a couple days to see how things settle out. Um, and then we decide how to proceed. Do we negotiate just with that first offer that just came in? Are we going to an auction? What do we want to do? How do we want to respond to the offer that we have? And many times the client is looking at me like deer in headlights, being like, what do we do? And they are nervous that the offer is going to evaporate, which it will not.
mm,
um if we don't, people forget that, like, or people authors don't know that it takes a lot of work for an editor to make an offer, like a lot of actual paperwork, which
okay.
I talk about in my book. And I actually discovered, like, I learned when I was interviewing editors for this book just how much paperwork they have to do. I think I just had not thought about it because it's not my job to do that paperwork. um and it's several days worth of work.
Mm,
So an editor isn't going to throw that out the window just because you took a couple of hours more than they want. They
mm,
want you to say yes, so they are invested. And then we go from there, and it's a lot of email. And eventually, the author, we might set up a call with the if the editor and the author haven't already spoken, or maybe we set up a kickoff call that's everybody gets on the phone and says, yay. And maybe we discuss a due date or something like that.
mm.
So it's a bunch of little details to nail down, mostly over email, and lots of uh, celebrating at your desk.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Kate, what can authors do, I guess, to maximize their chances of, beyond just writing a really good book, what can they do to maximize their chances of a literary agent picking up the book, and then B, the book being commercially viable long term? I mean, again, you talked about how you just want to write a book. It doesn't really matter what's popular right now, that kind of thing. Do writers need to think about that kind of stuff, like in terms of what's trending and that kind of thing, or do they just would you just advise them to write the book that's on their heart, and then it'll happen when it happens, kind of thing? What would you say?
I If you follow trends, you will be 2 years behind,
Hmm,
because the books that are you see now, even if it's just announced and there's, ARCs running around or galleys, and you're hearing all the pre-order talk, like that book was sold the year prior at least, and written 2 years prior to that at least.
hmm,
So that person had that idea 3 or more years ago, and if you're like, oh cool, I'm going to do that idea but a little bit different, well, you've got another 3 year runway in front of you till it hits stores. And so that's a 6 year span. Are we still going to like all the same things?
hmm.
I don't know. If I knew that, I would be, sipping Mai Tais on my island, and not, I would have a little bit of a different lifestyle if I could predict the future. But
Hmm,
so I think that the safest bet for an author is to write the book in your heart, because then at the very least you will be personally satisfied. And I know that that is cold comfort for a person who wants to be published. But if you are waiting for publishing to validate you, or make you feel whole, or tell you you did a good job, then you're going to be waiting for a very long time.
hmm.
And you may never get that.
Yeah.
So I say write for yourself and then figure it out later. Um, but also there's you have to think of the reader, which is different than the market.
Hmm,
Because you as a person who reads books has opinions and thoughts and feelings about the reading experience. And while you're not out there to just like make an author happy, a reader happy, if you are purposely toying with them because you think it's fun, and the reader is like, why?
mm,
Why did you narrate half this book from the point of view of a rock that's not even a character? You're like, well, maybe it was cool, but it's
yeah,
annoying to read. Put yourself in that position and be like, why?
yeah,
Why? And then think about how you buy books and talk about books and how
mm,
people might do that to your book.
mm,
Because if, maybe you have a unsatisfying ending in the reader's opinion, but you have this big artistic goal for it, is it going to be a book that everyone's like, oh, I really loved it until the ending? And
mm,
if your friend was like, hey, I read that book. I really liked it till the end.
mm,
You're not really motivated to go read that book.
mm,
You're like, oh, okay, well, must not be that good. I'll go read something else.
yeah,
So, how would you pitch your own book to your best friend to get them to read it?
mm. Either way, thinking about it. Yeah. Um, Slight segue, but um, how can authors best market their books personally right now? Obviously, things like book talk such a big deal, and I'm sort of like tentatively dabbling in that myself and trying to figure it out as a writer. But what have you seen at the minute, Kate, that works for authors in terms of getting their books, getting that like buzz going and getting that chatter going about books at the minute?
If anybody knows that, also they can tell me because I would also like to know. I don't. There's this disconnect between an author promoting their book and then the person going and buying it. And so you don't know, like the goal is to sell books, like we all agree.
Mm,
But I may make a post about on something and say, buy my book, or it's great. Here's what other people said. And then like 6 weeks later, someone could be in a store, see it and buy it.
mm,
And so we don't know if like it was that one post that took them to the store. And yes, there are ways to be like, oh, did you click through? Blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, but you still don't know if they, emptied their cart. Oh, wait, came back and refilled it later and then bought the book. So there's no direct metrics. You can see also what like people click on and what they watch and how long they watch it and things like that. And great, I'm sure there are many people in social media who will sell you ideas and marketing plans about how to make that happen, but I that is how to game an algorithm, not how to sell books.
mm,
So, I don't know. And in marketing my own book, I found that A, it is annoying as everybody talks about. Um, and B, it takes a lot of time.
mm,
And C is really necessary. So, even I have to like kind of suck it up and remember, don't post about your stuff. If you're not going to, then who will?
mm,
Because the reader is not looking at the publisher's Instagram.
mm.
Like that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, yay, your publisher Instagrammed it. Sorry, publishers. But like they don't have the like you don't do you follow the Gap on the internet? Probably, but does that make you want to buy jeans? Like, I don't know.
Mm,
So it's difficult and annoying and vague and amorphous, and the only way to do it is to do it and do it in the way that won't make you bonkers.
yeah.
Um, and I think that that's the long-term strategy that I'm going to do. And also, no one is watching every single thing you're doing.
Mm,
So if you think you have posted 40 billion times, the average person has seen a third of that.
yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
post 3 times as much.
Mm. How important, Kate, do you think building your own email-based audience is? Obviously, you're on Substack and you've got a 30,000 plus subscriber base there. Should authors be actively trying to build an email-based audience so they can connect directly with their readers and it's not kind of down to an algorithm to whether or not they see something that they post or not?
In theory, yes.
Mm,
But again, put yourself in the recipient's shoes. Why would I give you my email address?
mm,
I don't want you to email me. Like I think about that all the time. I was just at the US Open tennis tournament and there's all these giveaways and things. And they're like, give us your email address and you can have a free tennis ball or whatever. And I was like, well, I don't want you to email me. So I don't care if I get this tennis ball.
mm,
So what is it in it for the reader for them to give you their email address?
mm,
And the way it has worked for me in the newsletter is that I'm giving them people content. I'm giving them my thoughts and information and knowledge and experience
Hmm.
in exchange for their email address. And I happened to write a book about that. And I didn't, it was in the back of my mind when I started the newsletter, but I didn't plan it that
Hmm.
way. And so I think it can be effective for authors in other genres to say, if you want to know when my next book comes out, give me your email address.
Hmm.
And I promise not to like spam you. Like, I think that would be fine, but I don't want more email.
Hmm.
So I, you'd have to give me a good reason to give somebody my email address.
Okay. Um, how important do you think the actual writers, and sorry for using this phrase, but personal brand is at this point in time? And I'm very interested in this at the minute. I'm really kind of personally kind of studying this, like how important are writer brands and how can we develop them and that sort of thing. Do you think that is a thing? Is it important for writers to have kind of their own online persona and brand? And does that directly impact on how many books they sell and how effective they are and how viable they are, maybe as a in terms of like publishing houses, maybe looking at people who maybe they want to work with and that sort of thing? Or is it just entirely 100% down to the book and nothing beyond that?
In nonfiction, it's incredibly, incredibly important to have a brand, and to have a platform. I would say platform more than brand, because a platform is how you can reach people to tell them you have a book out.
Mm,
And brand is a more amorphous and kind of, like I don't know how to just how I don't know how you get a brand,
mm,
I don't know how you become a brand. I know how you can have a platform, but it's essential. I
mm,
see good books by nonfiction books by authors with no platform that I cannot sell.
mm,
Because the publisher can't create a platform for you and the book cannot create a platform for you. So I could probably talk about that for like for easily 45 minutes if we had the time, but I don't think that anybody wants to hear that right now.
mm,
It's a lot of it's in the book. But for a for a novelist, for adults specifically, because kids is different, um, you know, we all follow people on the internet that we like, that we have a parasocial relationship with. And if they wrote a book, we'd probably check it out because we're like, oh, that person I know, quote unquote, know, wrote a book. I should go check it out. And then you'll go check it out. And if it's something you want to read, you might buy it or read it or check it out from the library. And that's great. And if you're the author where that's happening, you're a couple steps ahead because people know who you are.
mm,
That's great. If you don't have that, you might be a couple steps behind. But I don't think that putting all your effort into becoming that person people like on the internet is
mm,
a viable publication strategy. It's a
mm,
thing that happens because you are comfortable on the internet, have a way of talking to people that people like, and I don't maybe do something fun. My friend Mary Robinette Cowell is a fantastic science fiction writer and fantasy, and her cat talks on the internet, like has one of those button boards where the cat like presses a button when it wants like a treat or whatever. And that account on Instagram has way more followers than her author account.
mm,
And I haven't talked to Mary Robinette about how that has impacted her sales or whatever. I don't know if she knows.
mm,
But I really like watching Elsie talk. So that
mm,
might make me like I might see Mary Robinette's content more because I don't know.
mm,
That's a long-winded answer to
mm.
if smoke them if you got them. Like do it if you can, if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something on I think it's on your website. You said about you're drawn to sincerity in writing. Why do you think that sincerity is so powerful in 2025 and beyond? Why is that becoming maybe more important than ever, do you think, at the minute?
I think that to be sincere, you have to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And vulnerability is really hard. And I think that a reader recognizes that and reciprocates, even if it's kind of, subconsciously. Uh, uh, it can show authenticity in the work. It can show risk. It can show that the author is saying, I'm doing this thing, like I
Mm,
hope it works. And the reader's like, cool, you're going out on a limb.
mm,
May I maybe I will respond in kind with my attention or my trust.
mm,
I think a lot of that happens off the page or just subconsciously, or I don't know how to do that as a strategy, but I
mm,
think that that is a response from the reader. I also think that the internet has made us absolutely exhausted by hot takes and wisecracks and reply guide stuff and um just low hanging fruit for and jokes and like response and like commentary.
mm,
So some things that are compelling to write, like a thinly veiled Donald Trump satire, is like satisfying in a way to write because you get out a lot of angst or whatever you feel, but it's like Cheetos. There's no there there.
mm,
It's like there's no and you don't risk anything. Everybody knows that this is a buffoonery. So there's okay, there's nothing for the reader to grab onto. And that's kind of what I think about when I talk about sincerity is vulnerability and risk.
mm,
And not everybody can afford to do that. But I think a reader recognizes it and wants to kind of respond in kind.
mm, mm. How do you infuse that into your approach as an agent? And obviously, all agents are sincere, but in terms of the way you approach people who are querying you or your clients, do you have a way of the way you speak to people and the way you respond to things? How do you kind of use or work that sincerity into your approach in your job?
Uh, on both ends, both to clients and to editors, if I say everything I've ever read is the best freaking book in the world, then it becomes meaningless.
Mm,
And so to editors, I can only play the card, you have to read this immediately. This is the best book you've ever read. Like drop everything, read this tonight. Like I can't play that card hardly ever.
mm,
Because if I do it too much, then they won't listen to me. And or they'll read it and be like, why does she think this is the best book ever? It's merely good. So you have to play your trump cards like sparingly, but also to my clients. First and foremost, of course, I'm complimentary. But if I am overly so to the point I'm kind of blowing smoke
mm,
at them, uh, they might have different expectations for how things will go. So if I'm saying to my clients, this is the single best piece of literature I've ever read in my entire life, where do we go from there?
mm,
And so I try to remember what a writer needs kind of as support and ego
keep them in
yeah,
check.
boosting, yeah, and
Yeah.
like nobody ego boosting and like support and cheerleading and things like that. Because as a writer, I definitely have also needed those things,
Mm,
but also I cannot bullshit anybody.
mm,
And so if I were to bullshit a client to say like this is going to sell in 5 seconds, it would be a lie because I don't know. And then
mm,
if it took 8 months, which is a total reasonable thing that happens, then they'll look at me like, I thought you said this was going to sell in 5 minutes.
mm,
So it doesn't do anybody any good to lie or embellish the truth.
mm,
But I also um, need the harder something is to say to a person, the more I have to say it.
mm,
And I just have to approach it delicately. And if I have a big concern about a something, then we have to go talk about it in a way that is kind and supportive, but honest.
mm. Would that be a big red flag for querying authors if an agent did come back and said something along those lines, like this is the best thing I've ever read and this is going to sell really easily? And or what are maybe other red flags that maybe querying writers should look out for if they get replies about things, or if they're approaching maybe indie publishers themselves? What should they maybe steer away from?
Anybody that asks you for money is trying to sell you something,
Mm,
or trying to get your money. A traditional agent will not ask you for money and should not and cannot if they are a member of the AALA, the American Association of Literary Agents, or the Association of American Literary Agents. I always forget. Um, the money flows from the publisher through the agent to the author, never the other way around in traditional publishing. If somebody is asking you for a check, they're a vanity publisher or a scammer.
mm,
And you should, I don't, that might not be what you want. Nobody wants to get scammed, but if you want to do a vanity publisher, go right ahead, but understand what you're doing.
mm,
Um, if a publisher or an agent is promising you a number of sales, so many books or so many dollars, they're trying to sell you something
mm,
because who can predict it?
mm,
Not anyone I know. So I even, when I'm very excited about a book and I have an idea in my head of what the range of an advance could be, I often don't tell my clients that specific number because one, I don't know. And I hate to be wrong, especially in the wrong direction. I'd love to be wrong when I have underestimated. I do not want to be wrong when I've overestimated.
mm,
And I will give a kind of a broad range. But I've had many clients ask me, well, how much are we going to get for this book? And I say, probably more than $5,000, less than $500,000, which is meaningless, but
yeah, it's broad
just,
enough.
yeah, it shows I'm not going to be wrong.
Mm,
Um, and down the road with experience and depending on the author, and because some people can take talking about numbers and some can't, maybe there's a more granular conversation to have. But promising numbers is bad. I would
yeah,
never. I wouldn't even promise somebody I could sell it because
mm,
I physically do not control that. I can just try.
yeah, yeah. No, it's great advice. And yeah, I think a lot of hopeful writers do kind of fall into these traps, and then they get very disappointed in future. Just a couple more questions, Kate, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but um, in terms of rejection, so every writer's gone through rejection. I've gone through a lot of rejection myself as a writer. Um, how can writers who are querying going through that process, how can they kind of deal with that? Obviously, there's only so much you can do as a person. You just have to maybe get over rejection after a point, but how can they manage that rejection more effectively? Would you say what would you like to tell writers who maybe are being rejected right now for queries across the board?
It's not you, it's
Mm,
the book.
mm,
I am not rejecting you as a writer and everything you will ever do. I am saying, I don't think I can sell this book.
mm,
And there are 100 bajillion reasons why. And none of them are the single only one reason
mm,
in insofar as that, like, if you fixed this, then my answer would change.
mm,
It's a dozen answers or a dozen reasons every time.
mm,
And so I know the knee-jerk reaction is to say, okay, well, tell me what's wrong so I can fix it. And so you will say yes. And like that's not a thing. If
mm,
it was a thing, I would have said, hey, let's have a conversation. Because if you thought you think this book is middle grade, but I think it's YA, let's talk about it, then that's a little thing that we could probably address. But it's never one thing, and it's not you as a writer. And I think I wrote somewhere, I think it was in the newsletter, I was like, this is about selling a product. And like if you think about it like you're shopping for something, like Old Navy's not mad you didn't buy that dress.
mm,
And while there is a personal reaction to being rejected, and you don't have to separate yourself from your book like it's a commodity,
mm.
it is in effect another thing on the shelf.
Yeah.
And you can make another dress, you can make another book, you can try again. And it's just a really long road. And literally every single person you have ever met who's tried to write a book has gotten a ton of rejection.
Hmm.
100%.
Yeah. What kind of stuff are you looking for right now? I don't know if you're open or not at the minute, but in general, at the minute, what kind of
Mhm.
stuff would catch your eye right now?
I'm close to cruise until September 8th, but the things I am kind of got my eye out for is I really still like a historical fiction. Um, for adults, it's harder for kids. Um, I really personally like things set in the 20th century that
Mm.
don't necessarily have to do with World War One or World War Two or Vietnam. Like maybe not about a war, just like anything else. And that is a little bit of a personal thing I like that I want to keep trying to do. And then I'm thinking that contemporary YA might happen again. There's a lot of fantasy YA happening. YA as a genre and as an audience in the book selling world has been plateauing or going down for several years. So it's been a really hard place to be.
Mm.
But I've read some things that I liked recently that were contemporary, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. What if we did it like this? Like, what if there was some
Mm.
more sincere and specific stories instead of these very generalized stories that I think that people have been writing for a long time. So that's what I've got my eye on. And always science fiction and fantasy. I always like it. Romantasy, sure. I'm not against it. I've liked it. Yeah, that's great. Um,
Mm.
but I want something I haven't seen before, which is the absolute worst answer to tell a writer because you don't know what I've seen. But
Yeah.
if it's just like everything else, then it's just like everything else.
Mm. Okay. Perfect. Kate, there's one last question, then we'll finish up. If you could leave our listeners and people watching this maybe later, with one golden nugget of advice about writing for a living, what would that be?
Everything is normal.
Mm.
Every experience you have, most likely, has happened to somebody else and will happen again and is not happening at you. Like publishing isn't rejecting all of your ideas because you're worthless. It's just a dumb retail industry. You know, um, you are not alone in, you are not alone, Liverpool fans. Yeah. You're not alone in it being hard. You're not alone in like looking at your manuscript and being like, what do I do?
Mm.
All of the uncertainty is absolutely 100% normal, and you just muddle through it the best you can.
Mm. Brilliant. That's a great answer. A great way to finish this conversation. Thanks so much, Kate. Yeah, no, this is really good. Honestly, like I think anyone who is writing a book right now or is maybe going to query it in future or is querying it right now in that stage, this is just gold, all this stuff. And it's really nice hearing from directly from the literary agent from like your perspective on all this kind of stuff, because often we don't really just know what's going on that side of things. So it's nice to hear that and really appreciate your time. Even from a Spurs fan, it's really nice to hear this kind of stuff.
I'll take
Uh,
it. I'll take it.
Thanks, Kate. Really appreciate that. And sure, I'll catch up with you again at Substack real soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate.